All right, so in our last video, we talked about um, how to teach students with diverse needs, and we talked about special ed on the low end, but then also upper level students, the gifted and talented students, and ways to teach them. And so, in our previous slide, let me just back up and show you. We talked about enrichment versus acceleration, and so here are some guidelines for how we're going to teach students that are gifted or talented. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to provide teaching that allows the use of the regular class as a forum for research, inquiry, and projects. This is why teaching with a variety of teaching methods is important, because you can allow students to explore topics and to really kind of venture out and get into some research and learn things that are of interest to them and have that fit within the regular curriculum. The next thing is to encourage curiosity and confidence. When a student wants to know something, be willing to answer their questions. And if you don't know, encourage them to go look it up and bring back and maybe report back to you or report back to the class. Because that's going to show them that there is a value in research and looking things up and asking questions, because they're going to learn so much more. And if they're interested enough to ask a question about it, then you need to encourage that, because you don't want to say, oh, don't worry about it, and then just leave it. Encourage that curiosity, because that's how they're going to learn. They're going to learn by asking questions. And you probably know that. If you've ever been around any kind of young child, you know that when they want to know something, they ask questions. And they go through a stage where they will ask questions over and over and over and over again, and you're steadily answering questions for them, which is a good thing, but that's how they're learning. And so it's the same way with these gifted and talented students. Allow exploration beyond the standard curriculum. So be, again, willing to encourage them to explore, the different topics that maybe kind of are an offshoot of where your main focus was in your class, and allow them to go explore some other areas that are content relevant, but maybe not where your focus as the teacher was going to go. Differentiate instruction. Again, we've talked about that. We know the benefits of differentiating your instruction. The next thing is help students develop the skills required for self-directed learning. So, one of the best things that you can teach a kid is how to teach themselves and learn for themselves. If they are strictly dependent upon you giving them information, well, when you're not there, what do? How do they learn anything? Well, they've got to go research it for themselves. They've got to go find information for themselves and know if it's a good source or not. For example, if they go just use anything off Wikipedia, well, I can go edit a Wikipedia page and make it say whatever I want to say. May or may not be accurate. So being able to find other sourcing besides just a standard Google search could be something that definitely helps them and helps them learn how to learn for themselves. Group students of varying ability groups by interest for cooperative projects. So in the last video that we made, I asked you about ability grouping. What do you think about ability grouping? And I still am not going to give you my opinion on that just yet. But you could group students by varying ability levels. And you could group them maybe by who's interested in what topics. So, for example, if you're going to do groups of 4 in your class and you're going to have them use one of those differentiated methods that we've talked about previously, well, you may say, okay, this group is going to study or going to become experts on whatever topic. For example, I think about my son that did a project where they were having to learn about different regions of the country. Well, he had the Gulf Coast. Well, if you know that you've got several kids who have been to the Gulf Coast and that's where families vacation, we may group them together and say, hey, I want you to become our experts on the Gulf Coast and share that with us. Well, now all of a sudden, they may all have different abilities, but they have something that they all enjoy and they're all interested in and they all can relate to, and so now they all kind of feel like they know something, right? And so that can be beneficial too. And the ones that are your higher level students may say, well, look, let me tell you about what we did, and we were there, and then that helps maybe the lower level students also. The next thing is teach complex thinking processes. This is one of the hardest things to do, teaching kids how to think. And I feel like in a geometry class, that's what I do a lot of times. When I was teaching that, I always felt like that was really the job. I was trying to teach people how to think and how to problem solve, and that's a difficult task. But if you can ever do that, I think it gives you a lot of value as a teacher. Look for alternative curriculum materials. If you just use a textbook or you just use the material that's given to you by your school district, that may be great material, and it may also not be great material. And so being able to look for other alternative methods, curriculum methods, or materials can be beneficial. And then implement curriculum compacting. So if you can tie things together and put topics together, that can be beneficial to students because they begin to see the connection between, okay, we did this and that's connected to this and it's going to be connected to this, and so you can kind of compact some of that together, and that can be beneficial as well. And then match students with mentors. Now, this is not something you see very often, but some schools can implement a mentoring program where you have a number of high-level students and put them with a teacher or maybe with an older student that also is a high-level student and let them learn from one another. I don't recommend doing this with peers that are the same age just because how do you determine who's the mentor and who's the mentee? But that is something that you could do as well. So as we continue on talking about dealing with students that are different. Again, remember this whole chapter is about diversity and the types of students that we're seeing. So students are diverse in a number of ways, and we've mentioned that. And Glaser talks about how you have a choice theory. He refers to it as his choice theory. And basically what it says is that students make choices based on satisfying various needs. So on page, I'm trying to locate it here in your book. Well, I don't know exactly what page it's on, but anyway. So one of the things that he talks about is that if a student has a need, their needs have to be met first before anything else can really happen. So they make choices based on their need for survival, obviously feeling safe. They make choices based on love and belonging. Are they getting the love that they need maybe at home? Does that impact what they do in class? Their need for power. So obviously not every kid's going to have power, and hopefully most of them don't have very much power, but there's a need for power, there's a need for freedom, and a need for fun. And so what Glaser says is that this choice theory states that students are making their choices based on their need for these basic needs. They're trying to satisfy those basic needs. So, for example, if a student comes to class or comes to school every day and they don't have anybody at home that says, I love you, then that's a problem. If they don't have somebody at home that they know loves them and cares for them, well, what they bring to school is a longing for that, a need for somebody to care for them. Now, they may have a parent that is there and takes care of their basic needs of shelter and food and clothing, but that may be all they're getting. And so it's important that as the teacher, if we see that a kid's not getting that love and belonging, they need to know that they have somebody that cares for them. That's where you as the teacher can come in, showing that student and telling that student that you care for them and that you love them and you want them to be successful and all those things. You have some students. I'm very close to a person at one point that had zero freedom at home. Actually, there's two people that come to mind that I was friends with that parents just were so strict, had to know exactly what they were doing at all times, did not trust them to be on their own, did not, just super, super strict. So decisions they made, not necessarily in school, but decisions they made were based on a need for freedom. Well, what do you think happened to those students? Well, there was a lot of rebellion because they never were free to go do anything without having to check in with a parent, tell the parent where I'm at. I knew a girl one time when I was at ICC. I went to high school with her, but they went at ICC too. And she worked in Tupelo. And this was before cell phones. Everybody had a cell phone. So when she would get ready to leave work, she was supposed to call home and tell her mom she's on her way home. Her mom knew exactly how long it took to get from where she worked to her house. If she wasn't there within 2 or 3 minutes, the mom was calling around trying to find out where she was. That's a little extreme. Now, there may be some parents will say, I need to know where my kid is. I don't trust them. Well, the problem with that is there was no freedom. And so this particular girl's need was, I need to be free. I need to do something that my parents don't know about. And so, long story short, this girl ended up getting arrested because she was stealing things from where she worked. Got out, spent a night or two in jail, but it was a need to rebel. And so that obviously became an issue. I had another friend who parents weren't quite as strict, but still pretty strict, and he wanted to move out as soon as he could get out. And so when he came to ICC, he wanted to stay in a dorm, even though he lived 5 or 10 minutes from the school. He wanted to get out because he said, well, if I'm out from under their roof, I can do what I want to do. And again, there was a little bit of a rebellion there because he said, well, they don't know what I'm doing and they can't tell me what to do because I'm not under their roof anymore. And so you have this choice theory where students are making decisions based on that. So when you get kids in class, well, a lot of what they do may be just the fact that they need these basic needs met. And so your class is going to work better if you plan for learning activities that help satisfy these needs instead of frustrating these needs. If your class is so strict that you don't allow kids to have any kind of freedom, well, that kid that's looking for some freedom, that may frustrate them. And that may make them say, I quit, I'm not doing whatever it is you want me to do, and it may become a problem. If if your activities are fun but educational, well, now you're helping meet those needs. You're allowing that student to have some fun and meet a basic need that they have, and so their response probably is better to your instruction. So as we continue on, again, we're just looking at the high points here on a lot of this diversity. As we think about students that are diverse, one of the main ways is through gender, right? We know you're going to have males, you're going to have females in each class that you have. And so we definitely want to promote gender equity, meaning that we treat these students in such a way that they don't feel like one group is being favored over the other. And so in your classes, some of the things that you can do is have high expectations for all students. This includes boys and girls. If I were to go into a math class and say, well, I know the boys are going to be better at math than the girls are, and I teach towards the boys, well, now I've neglected those girls when they may be just as good or better at math than some of those guys were. And so, um, definitely want to make sure that we have high expectations for all these students. The next thing is we need to organize our classroom and technology schedules so students don't segregate or monopolize by sex. So if all the girls get done with their work and I say, all right, all y'all go play on the computer, well, that may be that may not be fair to the guys. And so we want to again make sure that the technology schedule allows for guys and girls both to um, to be using that technology, equally. Avoid biased instructional materials. If you talk about things that only guys would relate with or that only girls relate with, then that can be a problem. So in my algebra classes, a lot of times when we talk about solving equations, I use the illustration of school and of equations being like a balance, keeping both sides equal to each other. And I will use the idea of a balance because I feel like everybody can relate to that. But I also tend to have a lot of athletes, guys and girls, that are familiar with lifting weights. And so I always try to make the comparison to lifting weights, about putting more weight on one side than the other and what happens when you try to lift it, and try to illustrate to them it's important that everything on both sides stays the same. And so I use an illustration that kind of probably favors the boys more than the girls, but hopefully also use illustrations that also favor the girls. So try to avoid that biased instructional material. And then we want to explain and address, if needed, the frequency with which students are called on and the kind of responses teachers provide. So if I call on only the girls in my class because I know they're going to do well, well, then the guys may say, well, why are you only calling on the girls? Or vice versa. If I'm only calling on the guys because I think they're going to know the answers, then I may have some of the girls say, well, why don't you ever call on one of us? And so you don't want to discriminate against who you call on. You want to make sure that you're trying to do that fairly. If there is a reason why you're only calling on, like for example, if I'm in my class and I'm only calling on the guys, odds are it's because I feel like the guys are not paying attention as much as the girls are. And so I'm trying to get their attention. So maybe I explain that. If that is something that I'm doing and my students see that, well, I could explain it, and that would definitely help them. Try to eliminate sex stereotyped assignments and tasks. Again, if I try to focus on assignments that only relate to the guys versus only relating to the girls, then that can be a problem. So I know, like for example, in my wife's class, she teaches English, and so she may give a book that all the guys really relate to, and then she may have another book that a lot of the girls really relate to, and so she tries to give assignments that meet both groups' interest and can hold their attention. Then we also want to structure learning to give girls equal opportunity to participate, or boys equal opportunity to participate. The reason girls is mentioned specifically is because in the past, and we'll talk about history later on, in the past, education was only for the guys. And so the girls were not given equal opportunity to receive the education. So we do want to make sure that we are giving that. In our time now in 2020, well, guys and girls both are getting the education. So we do want to make sure that we're not favoring one group over the other. And then we want to model sex equitable behavior, meaning that we want to treat everybody the same. We don't want to discriminate between guys versus girls. And then another way that students are different, and again, this is much more common today than it ever has been in the past, and that is through sexual orientation. You're going to have students that have that are straight. You're going to have some that are gay or lesbian. probably more so than I do, how common it is for students to have various sexual orientations. And so, when that is the case, and I ask in one of your discussion boards about how would you treat or how would you teach a student that is an LGBT student? Well, the number one thing is to establish a classroom guideline against name calling. You want to make sure that you're treating everybody with respect, and you want to respect those different viewpoints. Now, let me make sure you understand, respect does not mean agree. So you may not agree with a student that says they're gay or lesbian, but you at least respect it. Just as a human, you respect it. Again, don't necessarily have to agree with it. You may agree, you may not agree, but you respect it. You don't treat them poorly because of their sexual orientation. You treat them like a human being, just like you would anybody else. Okay? Also, make no assumptions about a student's family situation and their sexual orientation. So, don't assume that somebody is gay because of the way they act, because they may not be. They may just be feminine, for example. Don't assume that a student is one way or the other just because of the way they look or the way they act, because that may not be the case. You also need to be careful about using material that assumes that both parents, one are male, one's female. Because there are students nowadays that have two moms or two dads. And so if we were to do an activity, let's say in an elementary class, well, we're going to make Mother's Day cards. What do you do if a kid has two mothers or a kid has two fathers? If they have two mothers, I guess you could do two Mother's Day cards. If they have two fathers, though, what do you do? Well, there's not necessarily a great answer to that, right? So we want to not assume that their sexual orientation of their parents or themselves is what we typically think of as being male-female, okay? So just be careful with that. And then the other thing we can do to make schools safer for all orientations is be a role model. Treat all students with respect and dignity. Again, I don't have to agree with somebody and their sexual orientation. And this is not a religious debate or that conversation. I would have that conversation if somebody wanted me to, but this obviously is not the time to do that. But my point is, I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to think it's right or that, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm at least going to respect that. I'm going to respect the person, not necessarily their choice. And I don't necessarily have to agree with their choice, but I'm going to respect the person. And I'm going to treat them with respect. I'm not going to treat them like a, low-class, third world country citizen that doesn't deserve anything. Not that that's the right way to do it anyway, but I'm not going to treat them as a lower. I'm not going to treat them like an animal. Let me use that example. Versus treating them like a human being, right? I'm not going to treat them as if they're lower than everybody else because of their choices. And so we want to make sure we treat them with respect and dignity. And so to kind of sum all this up, again, we've talked about a number of diversities that students could have. And there are a lot of ways that your students can be diverse. And some of those we didn't really talk about a whole lot. If we had had more time or were in person, we might have talked about a few others. But some of the ways that we're going to teach students that are diverse. Seek out experiences to broaden your cultural and societal understanding. So if you're teaching several students that are from Mexico, well, you may want to learn about the Mexican culture a little bit. Find out what it's like for those students. What are their cultural norms? And so that you can broaden your understanding. For example, we have a mission group from church that goes to Honduras, usually once a year, and I had a group that was going to go, and I was talking to some of them, and they said, you don't cross your legs in Honduras where the bottom of your foot, the sole of your shoe, is shown. That's disrespectful. And I said, oh, why? And I don't know that I ever got an answer for that, but it just seems odd because you see people cross their legs all the time, right? Especially with a guy, cross your leg, you may have the sole of your shoe showing. Well, that's disrespectful, and so you wouldn't want to do that. And so, understanding that that could be something that I don't think is a big deal, may be very offensive to somebody in a different culture. You also want to spend time with people who are different than you, from an ethnicity standpoint, a cultural standpoint, language standpoint, and get to know those people. That's going to help you with those students that are coming from diverse cultures. Volunteer in schools that differ from those you attended. So as you're doing your observations, I think it's really important. And observations for my class, yes, but also for your in your teacher ed programs, I think it's important that you see schools that are different from where you attended, because you're going to see how different schools treat students. You're going to see how different cultures within a school work, and so having that experience is really beneficial to you. Learn about and appreciate the values and backgrounds of your students. Learn about where they came from. Learn what's of interest to them, what they value, and use that. Teach your students' strengths. So we've talked about trying to meet their needs and make sure that you're teaching in ways that are beneficial to them, using those intelligences and those 5 minds that we've referenced already. Teach to those strengths that they have. Provide a variety of educational experiences, again, through differentiated instruction, hands-on activities, anything that's just a little different and innovative to get your students to have the best educational experience as possible. And then involve students' families and respect values of both the school and the families. So, if you can get a student's parents involved in the school, their buy-in is going to be much better than those who say, I don't want to have anything to do with that school. And so the students are going to buy in more, the families are going to buy in more, school is going to be a topic of conversation with those families, and it's going to make your job easier as a teacher. I may ask you on one of your discussion boards to give me some ideas for how you might teach diverse students